Sí? Vinga, comencem, empecemos.
Okay, let's.
Good morning and welcome to today's session, Towards a New Time Balance. In a while, I'm explaining the objective and the structure of the session, but before, let me introduce myself. My name is Jessica del Moral, I am a journalist, and I am going to be moderating most of the tables today. Let's take a brief overview of the day's agenda. First of all, we will present a position paper that aims at setting a new framework for the future of working times. Once the presentation, we are going to discuss the paper. After these two first roundtables, the international and the national ones, we will take a break, grab a coffee, whatever you need to fuel up for the rest of the morning. The second event is about the opportunities that offer collective bargaining between employers and unions. After lunch, we'll come back to an inspiring session with different companies that have already implemented changes in their working times. To close this agenda, we scheduled a table to discuss the case of freelanced workers. What can we do to improve their time organization? An expert will point us to some highlights. Now, let us begin with the first session of the day. In the next 2 hours, we will explore the future of working time organizations. To kick off, we will present the position paper Towards a More Balanced Organization of Working Times, a document that outlines our stance of the topic. After this, as I said, we will open the discussion for international and local experts to comment on the document. We have an impressive lineup of experts who will share their insights, and we encourage you to actively participate in the discussions. So, without further ado, let's dive into this exciting journey. Let me introduce, first of all, Mariluz Vega, Honorary Consultant of the Complutense University of Madrid and former official of International Labour Organization. She's going to present the paper Towards a More Balanced Organization of Working Times. Mariluz. Good morning and welcome.
Buen día, good morning y buenos días. Y hasta aquí hemos llegado a hacer la traducción. And that's about my ability to speak in 3 different languages. I'll speak in Spanish. Unfortunately, I don't speak Catalan. My Catalan is very poor. And after many years of speaking English, I will allow myself to express myself in my mother tongue, which is lovely to do, being back in Spain. I've had the opportunity to work in the group in charge of this position paper. That was a commission by the Labour Ministry of Spain, based on working times. This is not something that affects strictly the work sphere, but it is closely connected to all areas of life. If we explore what time is and what working hours are, well, that really depends on social models that are connected to the world of labor relations. Actually, time and working time specifically is a very social and political matter, apart from being a productive and economic matter too. Time has to be adapted to changes in society. The way we organize our time has to do with the way we feel, we think, and we live. So it's the social dimension of enjoying our time. Actually, the 24-hour organization of time dates back to the 19th century. Owen was the first one to talk about 8+8+8. So that was working time, leisure time, and rest time. But of course, the world is not split in 8+8+8. Lines are blurred. At the ILO, where I have been an official for over 32 years. And in 1919, after the signing of the Versailles Treaty, well, they believed that working time was one of the basic rights, and they determined the 40-hour working week. I'm not very good at maths, but we're talking about 104 years ago, and we're still talking about the 40-hour week as a need to be met in many countries. Remember what has just happened in Chile. So we're very aware that working time is connected to a dignified, a decent job, and they are promoting through different tools, and Martin will tell you more about it, about the ILO. Let me mention the objectives, the goals that we have set for a balanced working time, which is the idea that we want to promote here. Rationalizing and reducing working time is the main idea. If we check the current calculations in the work sphere, we will realize that very often we work more than 40 hours, not only in the EU, but currently in Spain, we have a 48-hour week on average every quarter. And that means that we really have problems when it comes to our work-life balance. And that's not logical. We cannot rationalize and reduce working time. There are many collective bargainings that reduce working time. For example, in the private sector, I will not deal with the public sector because they have a 37.5-hour week on average. But very often we're talking about a very long working week. And there's a trend to have endless overtime, which is the way in which we increase our working hours. And the minimum wage is very often not enough, or the actual wage is not enough. This didn't happen when we created that, but of course the economic situation that Spain is going through as a consequence of the conflicts and the unreasonable prices. So it's quite clear that the stress caused by the lack of time management results in conditions, in illnesses. There are many studies that show night work's connection with cancer onset, how stress generates heart diseases, and we are talking about huge percentages. Eurofund, for example, has conducted many surveys in that matter. And we wanted to set a better guarantee of transparency and the foreseeable character of working hours. It's true that in our regulation, we don't have these consolidation of working hours. We want to guarantee flexibility and autonomy, but on the other hand, everything is very scattered, and someone who works partially has to be available 10 hours every day, which is totally nonsense. We wanted to promote the sustainability of working hours, promote people's autonomy, and adapt it to people's private life and needs. And we need working time organization that is more egalitarian, because that has a very clear impact on discrimination, especially gender discrimination. Women are those most impacted by an unruly time organization. And in our proposal, we aim to promote more engagement by employers and allow for more autonomy of the parties, promote social dialogue and collective bargaining, which is key in our opinion here and in all walks of life. Which are the key measures for a balanced work organization? Well, number one, to reduce working hours. That was based on different studies that we have dealt with of the reality in Spain. We propose a maximum working week of 37.5 hours for 2026. This is yet another proposal by the government. We hadn't gone as far. 32-hour week for 2032. That's the idea, to reduce the working hours. We have not proposed a 4-day working working week because we don't think we are mature enough to propose that as a bill, but we do not rule it out if we keep reducing working hours. And 38, 37 hours is quite a reality in many Spanish businesses, and we should maintain that. Another key measure is to reinforce that companies need to report consistently, especially to avoid excessive OT, excessive or unruly shifts, for people to know what's going on and for them to better manage the information, and for the business, for the employer to better manage their productivity. Information has to be at the service of the employer and the employee. And we want compact working hours, consolidated ones. In the last reform, as I said, we opened up the possibility to interrupt the working hours, and that was not feasible. So we propose one single interruption in split working days, so that someone who works 4 hours a day should not be on call for the whole day. This happens in the hospitality business, for example. And weekly rest has been expanded. We talk about 1.5 days, according to international regulations, but many employers are doing more than that, and the public sector. And by doing that, we can have more compact working days. And then night work and shift work, that is extremely damaging for our health. And we had to look for measures to do away with the risks for the workers. And then we need correct shift management, rest times. I mean, night work is indispensable. We cannot avoid night work in some industries because it's just part and parcel of their operation. And then we had planned for different possibilities to reduce the working day. These are enshrined in other laws, not in a time use law, for example, to allow for different leaves, permits, working day reduction. So it's about expanding work-life balance and adapting our regulation to the EU regulation that includes some highlights. And there are some decisions by the European Parliament and the European Council, the Council of Europe. And something that is very much needed is a plan to improve working time organization and work time use. And this can be done jointly with other plans, such as equality plans for businesses with over 100 employees. This is key. This must be key for all companies because it has implications in terms of equality, in terms of development, productivity, and in the wages. Which are the benefits of a balanced time organization? Well, there are benefits for health, for equality, for efficiency, sustainability, and productivity. Of course, we will improve the work environment if we are very rational about it, and it will allow us to work in a better, cleaner and greener work environment, and this has to be present in our working time organization. Which are the public policy recommendations that we have included or maintained in our position paper? Number one, we want to maintain the principles of the ILO and European directives, because they are key in the guidance and the reform itself. It's fundamental to take into account consensus-based organizations directives. In the case of the ILO, they represent nearly 200 countries, employers, employees, and government. So it's a guarantee that goes beyond the legal obligations. It's a moral guarantee. And then this is for EU members. Directives have to be implemented, and we need to comply with them because there's a legal obligation there. We believe it's important for national governments and the different EU member states, they need to draft a clear plan or a rule, a regulation to regarding time uses and working time organization, because regulation should not only establish a minimum, a mandatory minimum, but they have to take into account the time uses in an integrated manner. If we have a personal life like the one we have in Spain, for example, a TV prime time is midnight, so that changes our circadian rhythms, and I've had the possibility to work with chronobiologists, and as a legal expert, it's been quite a unique experience. It's very important to have the support, and unions and employers' organizations should have their own internal guidance and regulation about time use and how to manage time. They have to start thinking that working times are key for any other claim in the case of unions, but the same goes for employers' organizations. If they want to be more productive, they have to comply with time use regulations. Otherwise, they will see their productivity go down. And we need to raise awareness among the civil society. With the presentation of these proposals, we've seen some headlines, some pieces of news saying that time uses are key, and people are starting to talk about not only working times but social times too, especially in this country where we have very odd, very weird social times. These, I mean, the fact that we have lunch at very weird times, well, this was a post-war result. Basically, people had to work more hours to make more money, and that's the background. That's why we have these very outlandish hours in Spain. It doesn't make any sense. We need to change things. We don't want people to work more hours or longer hours. We want people to work less, better, in a more productive manner. So these are the ideas that we deal with in this position paper. It's a very broad position paper, and if you are interested in any of the parts, I can still share more information with you. And we want to disseminate these throughout different countries. We need to work holistically and not only in silos regarding working hours, even if I have been more involved in the working hours. Thank you very much for your patience, and have a lovely day.
Muchas gracias a ti, Mariluz. Mariluz.
Thanks ever so much.
Paper. Before presenting the panel, we will share a short video bringing a special insight into Latin America's evolving work times organization, with a focus on gender care tasks divisions, guided by the committed approach of ECLAC, Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, from UN. She is Lucía Escuro.
Desde la Comisión Económica para América Latina y el Caribe queremos agradecer esta invitación, saludar a las organizaciones.
To welcome you all from ECLAC and wish you a very fruitful week, and especially a greeting to the TUW colleagues. As you know, the ECLAC, ECLAC, convenes a regional conference on women in Latin America and Caribbean for the past 45 years. And we have looked at the regional gender agenda to move towards, or to achieve, autonomy of women and gender equality in countries of the region. For the past 9 years, this conference has identified and has adopted issues of gender, with 4 thematic focuses centering on, if you like, disequality, inequality suffered by women, persistence of poverty in the region, cultural patterns which are discriminatory in nature, concentration of power, and the 4th, and I'd like to share with you, is sexual division of labor. The last conference was in Buenos Aires in November 2022, and member countries of ECLAC adopted the Buenos Aires commitment, where the society of care and care providers was a key moment, a key issue. important to ensure that care is not just a need for every single person, but they are also a work, and therefore at different paces, at different rhythms, and starting with different vantage points, have advanced in designing policies and care systems the last few years. Many of them based on official information which comes from time use surveys. One of the main tools which Latin America and Caribbean has is to fine-tune and hone the various tools within the Conference of the Americas and the Conference of Women in Latin America. A number of countries have carried out a survey on how people distribute time and how much time is earmarked for non-remunerated work for the well-being, their own well-being, well-being of their families. 19 countries have the possibility of calculating indicator 5.4.1 proposed in the SDG agenda within SDG 5, and which refers to the time which men and women earmark to work of care or care work. Looking at the division of this work and also how it shares out with professional work is key to be able to advance towards SDG 5. The time dedicated to remunerated work and care work which demand our families, work in domestic work, and persons with dependency or children are a priority to achieve gender equality. The concept of co-responsibility, social, within the state and the family are essential, and also the redistribution of care work within men and between men and women. In this conceptual framework, ECLAC would like to provide support when it comes to statistics and if you're making these surveys more accurate and looking at public policies concerning care work. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good week. You can applaud.
Is open the first panel today. Let's start with international experts who are going to share their reflections about the policy paper just presented. They are, apart from Mariluz Vega, Martín Humblet, Senior Specialist in ILO's Working Conditions Department. You can join us to the table. And online, Jorge Cabrita, Research Manager at Eurofund, who will join us online. And we heard before Mariluz Vega. I would like, she's here, so take a seat. My first question is for Jorge and Martín. Jorge is online. Martín, Jorge, in your respective areas of expertise, what are the most promising strategies or initiatives that can be implemented to promote a healthier work-life balance through a new work time organization? Let's start first with Jorge.
Hi, hello, I hope you can hear me well. Thank you so much for the question. What I would like to say, first of all, is that I'm very pleased to be representing Eurofund here today in this initiative of yours. And in relation to your question, I believe that one of the main things that, at least from a research point of view, from the things that we can see from the data that we collect, for instance, in the European Working Conditions Survey, which Eurofund has been carrying out since 1991. So every 5 years, we collect information about the working conditions of workers. And we have looked very attentively at some of the variables, some of the data that we collect in that survey. And in relation to work-life balance, for instance, which is also part of this discussion of working time, we found out that something very simple, which is to give workers the possibility to take some time off, like 1 or 2 hours off from work to deal with family or personal issues, is a very strong measure that can be taken to improve workers' work-life balance. So that would be one. The other one is one that was mentioned already before, which is to give workers a bit more autonomy over their working time. So, and this can be done in different ways. But the most important idea here is that by giving workers the possibility to be part of the discussion of how work can be arranged in their workplace, if they are part of that conversation, if they are part of the solutions for the problems which are many times raised by the difficulty in organizing work in such a way that it works for everyone, for employers, for the businesses, for the companies, for the organizations, but also for workers. If they are part of this conversation, then we can find better solutions. And these are some of the things that I could, but I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge Cabrita, for letting us know this result, this conclusion compiled by Eurofound on the trends of work time development. We are very interested in listening to Martine Humblet's point of view, Martine, from her international labor law perspective.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be with you today, especially since I could note that, in fact, our conclusions really coincide with those highlighted by Mariluz. This is not surprising. In fact, I want to put it a little bit in a more global context, in the fact that the ILO adopted the first ILO standards was on working time in 1919, and at the time, it's true, the goal was to limit working hours to 8 per day, 48 per week, with limited exceptions for overtime. Since then, the situation has really changed, and working time has been individualized, and the functioning of the economy and the labor market has changed as well. So, just to pinpoint that we speak here a lot about very long hours. I mean, the reduction of them, the need for that, and that's true. There is a very recent ILO research that show that hours of work across the world, the average is 44 hours per week, but that doesn't show the reality of individual workers, where we still have a third of workers in the world that still work more than 48 hours per week. But on the other hand, there is a fifth of the workers who work less than 35 hours per week. So you have issues of overemployment, but also for certain workers, underemployment, and also those who are faced to variable and unpredictable hours. So our concern, and when we try to provide guidance to member states, to workers' organizations and employers' organizations, is also to take account of this diversity of situation. Our advice in terms of what are good and decent working time arrangements are really close to what you have suggested. So I mentioned 5 criteria in our view. It's working time arrangements that protect workers' health. And as you said, long working hours are not good for health. Working at night, shift work, all of these have different impact on health, but there are some measures that can be taken to improve the situation. I just give one example. In the case of shift work, is having a short cycle, avoiding excessive days in a row working with a sufficient weekly rest to enable workers to recuperate after their working time, but also avoiding too many night shifts in a row, so alternating between day and night, and so on. So on each of these difficult working time arrangements, including night work, we have guidance, we have a guide on that was published to at least try to mitigate the impact. Decent working time arrangements are also those that are productive, and Marie-Luz has mentioned it, and in fact we have evidence that show that working time arrangements that benefit workers may also benefit employers for a number of reasons. There is better retention, there is higher productivity. Why? Because workers are more motivated, they are less tired and so on, so they can invest more their workforce in their activity. Family-friendly, this has been mentioned by the two speakers, is work-life balance. Is taking care of the family is one thing, because care, it's true, is important. Sorry. We have a convention on that, Convention 156, that prohibits discrimination against workers with family responsibilities, but also encourages member states to have policies to enable workers to combine their work and their family responsibilities. We do not have currently a standard addressing specifically work-life balance beyond the exercise of family responsibilities, but this may be a step for the future. This is closely linked to gender equality, and I really like the comment that was made regarding the division of the gender division of labor. And working time cannot be taken in isolation, because in fact, you can reduce working time, but if women still have the burden of care work and domestic work, this will just allow them to focus more on their family responsibilities and not to have time sovereignty, having the choice of their time use. So this is also about the general policy of the government to develop care institutions, for instance, childcare, access to school, and so on. So this is just to say that working time is one component of a bigger picture. And the last element that is also crucial and was mentioned is the possibility of workers to influence their working time arrangements, about the number of hours they work, but also when they work. And in fact, when I mentioned the positive effect of balanced working time arrangements on productivity and business efficiency, this is key. It's not about simply saying we will reduce the number of working hours. It's also letting workers have a choice about, do you prefer to come in late in the office because you have other personal activities, but you are able to stay later, so you can have staggered hours, for instance. You can have flexi time, as we have in the ILO, and we have just a new policy that was introduced, allowing us a certain choice among different options, which in fact improves workers' morale and then productivity. So just to say that the key here is to have a balance, a win-win situation, and this is really feasible. It's not workers against employers. But this requires not only a regulation from the top, but collective bargaining at different levels, at the sector level, but also negotiation at the firm level, because that's where work takes place. And finally, I just want to mention two things that link to the use of technology that I think are really should be the subject of attention. One is working time in the platform economy, because in most cases one say that the freedom to choose one's own schedules is one of the main motivations for workers to engage in platform work. But we have shown in a recent report that actually this freedom may be more theoretical than practical for different reasons. For instance, these workers are paid on a piece rate basis, which when there is high competition because there is a large panel of workers available, pushes the rates down and pushes workers to work longer hours to make a living. That's one thing. Another thing is the need felt by workers to be on call all the time in case there is a task opening that comes, whether it's online work or working as a driver or delivery riders. and of course the use of algorithms that has clearly an impact with the algorithm, for instance, increasing the rate at asocial hours to push workers to stay and work longer in the evening, at night, or during the weekend. So that's really one key concern, and in fact the ILO has decided to engage in a standard setting on decent work in the platform economy, and we really hope that working time will be a key component of that standard setting. And the last element I want to mention is the right to disconnect that has been introduced in Spain and in other countries, essentially in Europe, although now it's also coming in Latin America. And that's really something that needs careful attention, because you can put that in the law, in the labor code, saying workers need to have the right to disconnect outside of regular working hours. But how does that work effectively? You know, when a worker may feel the pressure to read emails or to respond to a message coming from the employer or the supervisor in the evening, during the weekend, and sometimes also during holidays. So I think technology has helped reduce working time, but may also have an impact clearly that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. We want to know what Mariluz, as one of the authors of the paper, thinks about these two reactions, these two preview interventions. Mariluz, y me preocupa. Me ha llamado especialmente.
I was concerned by this datum of 44 sort of working week on average, and these data which you were referring to.
¿Cómo te sientes más cómoda?
No sé. Well, I will do in English, because I say for Martin, I say even if she preferred French, but anyway. In fact, say we are talking on different ways to deal with the working time. If we talk about Europe, it's not 44 hours. But if we talk about, for example, Latin America, because I know this event is especially focused also in Latin America. In Latin America, 48 hours is a very normal, real formal pattern, even in legislation. And in reality, I will tell you, this is even worse. And it's even worse because we are talking, for example, of informal economy. Informal economy is a non-regulated economy, to simplify, because it's much more complex, the concept. And at the end, these people are working 60 hours per week, and it's not possible to control. Then the reality is we are in different regulation, in different situations, and I think if we remind us very close the debate in Chile about the weekly, I say the 40 hours per week, then for us is something that we are over long time ago, can show which is the reality. And Latin America is not the worst. Martin knows better than me. I say what is happening in Asia or in Africa, better not to refer to here. Then the reality is this. And I think the average is quite optimistic because it's based on legislation. The reality should be much impressive, much more impressive. Huh?
Anything else about their comments on the paper, Martin's and Jorge's?
About Martin, I cannot say anything in particular because I say, as Martin says, it's not very strange that I will be in real aligned with the ILO, because I have been working in the ILO for more than 30 years. Then it's part of my DNA in some way, and also because I believe what ILO is promoting, and we have been inspired in the text. And I cannot say anything, mainly to strengthen the importance of this standard on platform. I think it's a very important discussion that we will take place, not only related with platforms, but it can also orient other different discussion related to this evolution of the world of work, and in relation of the working time will be very, very relevant, I will say. Concerning Eurofund, also, the difference between Eurofund and ILO in terms of values and commitment are zero. We are different. You have different perspective. You are more devoted on research, but you are also even tripartite. Then, nothing to say about. I have no comments. I say we agree. I think the good thing of this is we are all in the same line with different aims at the end. But we are all in the same line, and I hope we can very soon go further and to improve at all levels, in particular at national level, following the different advice from the organizations. Yeah,
you three are in the same line of thinking about the benefits in the improve use of time. Okay, then if you have no comments to do, what we are going to do now is to open this discussion to the public as well. Sorry?
Who wants to speak? Jorge.
Sorry,
Jorge ha levantado la mano.
Jorge ha levantado la mano. Sorry, Jorge, I haven't seen you. Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, because initially I was replying directly to your question, and there's a few points that I would like to underline, which is related to some of the issues that Martin raised as well. And it's reading this proposal, this paper, one of the top things that came to my mind is that perhaps one of the goals, or at least to consider the possibility of considering the distribution of work itself as one of the goals for a better organization of working time. I believe that this is part of the background and it's there, but it could be a bit better and kind of a bit better, more evident, let's say. And I have a few figures here to share with you and with the public there about how uneven the distribution of work. And this is data from our working conditions survey from 2021, and it illustrates what Martin mentioned and Mariluz, and I think this is one of the most important challenges that we are facing in Europe, which is the uneven distribution of work. And by work, I'm referring to paid and unpaid work. So in 2021, we had, on average, women working a total of 70 hours per week, including paid and unpaid work. And by unpaid work, I'm talking about care, education of children and grandchildren, care of elderly people, disabled relatives, but also cooking and doing housework. So if we take all these things into account, on average, the female worker in Europe would work 70 hours per week. Their counterparts were doing 7 hours less. So men were working on average 63 hours. Now, what we know is that in terms of paid work, on average, men spend more time than women. And there's a difference there. So there's a difference of 6 hours. So women work on average 6 fewer hours per week on paid work than men do. But then when we look at unpaid work, they work 13 hours more than their male counterparts. So at the end of the week, you have this difference of 7 hours. So every single week, on average, women are spending 7 hours more at work, especially because they do more unpaid work than men do. And here I would like to bring, because I think this is a helpful concept, the concept of opportunity cost, which is basically the value of the next best alternative when we make a decision. So in simple terms, when we give up, what do we give up when we make a choice, when we do something? And I would like you to imagine the opportunity cost of the time that women spend in this unpaid work more than their male counterparts. So if you take these 7 hours into account, at the end of each year, this is roughly the equivalent of 8 weeks of 48 hours of work. This is a lot of time. So you can think of the opportunity cost of this time. What else could women be doing with this time apart from unpaid work that could be better more evenly distributed with their male counterparts. And this is one of the elements. The other element I would like to also underline is the difference between what's on paper, and this was already mentioned, what's on paper and what's practice. So, and here we have information about contractual hours and actual hours. And actually, what we see is that in 2021, 1/3 of employees with their contractual hours expressed in their contracts usually worked more hours than they were contracted for. So 1/3, 35% of men and around about 30% of women were working more than what they had on their contract. And this is also expression of the issue that the colleagues mentioned there in relation to working hours. And the problem of the platform work, it's not just the platform work, there are many other forms of employment status which suffer from this uncertainty as well, because according to our data, only 80% of the workers in Europe, of the employees, better said, in Europe, in the European Union, have their working hours expressed in their contracts, which means that there's 20% of them for which working time is not written down. So they don't know if and when they are working. And this is quite concerning. This is one of the main things that we should take into consideration when we are talking about the better organization of working time. And then just to conclude, because I don't want to take much more time, and I think we are all aligned, as you mentioned, I fully agree, just to say that it's important when there's one key measure which is presented there, which is the improvement plan for working time arrangements. Even in Europe, where social dialogue and collective bargaining plays an important role in many countries, we know that this is not the situation for all the member states. So there are a few member states where the traditions and the institutions present in those countries are favorable to a good social dialogue, a good collective bargaining, to the participation and the discussion between workers' representatives, employers' representatives, but this is not the case everywhere. So we have to also bear in mind, and perhaps this is a good starting point, I mean, to kind of bring working time to the fore of the discussion and bring these two sides of industries to the table to discuss working time. But the fact is that, and we have been following this for many, many years now, in many member states, especially those member states that joined the European Union at a later stage, social dialogue and collective bargaining does not play an important role in the establishment of working time. Working time is defined by law, and then it's implemented at company level with very little participation of workers. And this is something that certainly should be improved. So at the same time, you have other countries where working time is effectively decided at different levels through processes of social dialogue, collective bargaining at sectoral level, sometimes at company level. And again, this is it seems to us that is the best way to go, because that's what provides a better balance between the needs of workers and employers. And I'll stop here. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. The importance of collective bargaining as well to improve the use of time. The gender equality is very challenging too. And what Jorge said, that women work 7 hours more per week, especially unpaid work. This is very impressive, isn't it?
Yes, clearly. And that's why we really need to take the gender dimension in the definition of working time arrangements. And there is some research that has shown that, in fact, a collective reduction of working time, i.e., reduction, for instance, from 40 to 35 or 35 to 32 in the future, possibly, is more effective for gender equality than individual reduction of working time, like part-time work, for instance. Because, in fact, when women they are the majority of part-time workers, and one can think, wow, that's wonderful, because then they have a lower burden, lighter burden. But in fact, first of all, the time that becomes free, that is not paid labor, is mostly dedicated to unpaid work, as was mentioned. And also this reinforce the gender segregation of the labor market, with women having more access to occupations where part-time work is feasible. So that's really one difficulty. Another one that is less evident, but I've read an article on that, even in the case of flexi-time. So flexi-time is a working time arrangement when there are core hours where everybody needs to be there, and around that there is some flexibility. You can come earlier, later, provided that at the end of the week you have worked the contractual hours. So one could think that, well, this is easy, this is really the way that women could use to meet their needs. But there is a study that has shown that, in fact, in reality, men tend to use that flexi time, that flexibility, to do their personal activities, where areas women tend to use that time to take care of the children and other person for whom they care. So that's really tricky. It's not an easy solution to say, okay, we have very nice working time arrangement here. Gender equality in working time is maybe the most difficult challenge to meet.
Mm-hmm. It's tricky, yes. What we are going to do now is to answer questions from the audience. You have, okay, now your turn.
Thank you very much for your brilliant input. I'm Ulrich Mückenberger, and I would like to make one point with some questions to the speakers. The point is, working time policy is only a part of the wider time policy. It's not an isolated island within it, but we have to look at it from the point of view of everyday life quality and of the right to time, I'm afraid. And I want to make 3 points which you mentioned. I'm doing a project together with the ILO on globalization and labor law, working conditions. And there we find that 80%, according to the estimations of the ILO, 80% of workers in Latin America are informal workers. That means for them, any working time regulation does not per se apply. So the question is, how is their quality of life improved? Is that really by working time, or is it by elements like in India, the SEWA, Self-Employed Women's Association, with 1 million members, who try to organize the informal sector? So what is your position to that? Because it has very much to do with quality of life. The second element is, of course, the unpaid work. The unpaid, the 7 hours, which Jorge mentioned. What is the strategy from a time political issue beyond gender, which is crucial, without doubt? What is the other policy to change the notion of work so that it does not only include commodified labor, but also unpaid work, which is essential for society? And the third element, which I wanted to raise from a time political view, I found it very good that Martin underlined the role of autonomy within work. Autonomy, you mentioned choices, leave, impact on organization of work, because time politically, a loss, a gain of time welfare does not only consist of getting rid of paid labor, but also getting freedom within paid labor. So the question would be how to extend this type of choice-oriented, qualitative time policy in the firms.
Thank you for this icebreaker and very interesting question too. Martin.
I'm not sure I can answer to all questions. As regards the informal economy, and if we take, in fact, self-employed workers in general, even beyond the informal economy, these are those who work longer hours, that's for sure. In the informal economy, that's in fact the elephant in the room, because yes, that's the key concern is workers in the informal economy, either the law does not apply to them or is not enforced. So we can adopt the best laws, the best collective agreements, we won't reach them. And yes, we have some teams at the ILO that are concerned with the formalization of the informal economy with a number of strategies. As regards working time and income in general, those are very interrelated. I would say that the key is really the tools, developing tools to improve productivity, because in many cases the informal economy is also not with very low productivity, and you can reduce hours of work when productivity increases, because then it enables to produce a sufficient income. So that maybe that's for me the key tool for that. As regards unpaid work, as I had mentioned, yes, the importance is really to develop professional care work. This is also an area where the ILO is further developing its activities, and there will be a discussion at the conference next June on that. And this is also linked to another problematic, is the fact that what we call in general domestic work, which includes care work, this is under-evaluated. In the past, it was not even considered to be professional work. So we now have a standard on that. That is very important, and we try to promote it. And the idea would be that domestic work becomes decent work, and then it can attract very good professionals, and that would be a relief from this unpaid work. And the last point, I don't have much to say. That autonomy is key. As I've said, it has shown that this has the highest impact on productivity. So I think businesses should really be interested in the development of autonomy and not being control freak. Beyond enterprises, beyond work, labor relations, I wouldn't have much to say, because working at the ILO, we are trying to improve at least the situation, including as regards autonomy in the work relations.
Thank you, Martin. Jorge, I don't know if you have anything else to add to Martin's reflections.
I do, yes. Points. In relation to the working time regulation and the application to the informal sector, I fully agree with what Martin said, but I would like to draw our attention as well to the fact that, for instance, in the European Union, through the European Directive on Working Time, the other side of the coin is that we also have certain groups of workers who can deviate from that directive, for whom some of the, let's say, standards or minima that should be applied according to the directive do not apply. And I'm thinking about this kind of group of people which are generally called managers. So there's under certain conditions, these workers, they can deviate from working time, the working time directive, in terms of, for instance, the 48 hours maximum per week. And the fact is that if we look at the figures, this is the group of workers that among the different levels of occupation, they work the longest hours. So there's this kind of also idea of self-exploitation, people who have certain levels of responsibility and so on would drive themselves to work very, very long hours. And the legislation actually allows for that. So it's just to kind of show a little bit the other side of the coin. Then beyond gender and what kind of other policies, I believe Martin mentioned, but I was taking note of some of the things that we could think of. So first of all, good public care services and the value that we give to this sector. So recently we have conducted some research on the working conditions and job quality of essential workers, and ILO has done also a big report about the so-called key workers. And the fact is that occupations which are considered as essential, at least they have been considered as essential during the pandemic, and we are talking about long-term care and healthcare workers, for instance, are not socially valued enough. So this is also something that public policy should address, is to find mechanisms to value these occupations better in these sectors as well. Then we can think about transport, we can think about education as well, because gender stereotypes, the gender segregation that we find in our labor markets and our division of work, in my opinion, the destruction or the breaking down of those stereotypes starts in school, from very early stage, to start to break down those stereotypes, so that it's we can find ways that people split work, divide work between them in a more egalitarian way. And then in relation to the last point, that is a very, very important aspect of a good organization of working time, is to account for workers' preferences over their working time. And it's not just their preferences. What we have to bear in mind there in terms of policy making is that these preferences change throughout people's lives. So we need to have a lifelong perspective of the preferences of workers over their working time, because when they are in their early stages of their career, maybe they don't have children yet, so they have a bit more time to dedicate to work. At the later stage, if children appears in the household, the needs completely change. At some point, people might want to develop a little bit more and do further education. Again, their working time needs change. So we have to also think in dynamic terms, and to account for these changes of individual preferences over the life course, because the preferences and the needs of workers are not constant over time. And I will stop here as well. I hope this helps the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. I don't know if there is any other questions from the public. No? Okay, then, I want to ask you, from your experiences and perspectives, how can organizations and governments collaborate to effectively implement and enforce policies that support improved work time organization? What can they do? Martin.
Well, from the ILO perspective, I can only say social dialogue, clearly. I mean, we will repeat it with different terms, but this is really key to have the views of the different stakeholders. The government, for instance, if we speak of care, as you mentioned, clearly the public authorities need to be involved at different stages. It can be the central state, it can be the region, it can be the city sometimes, to define public institutions dealing with care. We need to have employers' organizations, either the general ones, the sectoral one. We can have employers' representatives at the firm level, especially if we have large firms. They need to present their point of view, their needs in terms of flexibility, because flexibility is also a need of firms. So when we say a win-win situation, we need to find a balance between the different interests and needs. And of course, we need to have workers' representatives, unions to be there and present the point of view of workers. And it's only through dialogue, which is for us one of the pillars of the ILO, that we can reach a solution that would be sustainable, that would meet the needs of the different parties, take into account the constraints, the evolution of constraints, as you said, for the workers, that the situation is not the same for young workers with young children and for someone who is older with no more children at home, for instance. So that's the only way. There is no unilateral policy that would be sustainable. That's clear. If you want to.
Thank you, Martin. We are running out of time, but if you have something to add, Mariluz, Jorge, before closing.
Maybe if I can say something related to what he has mentioned in relation to how we need to cover all the workers, not only the ones you mentioned commodization, but I will say subordinate work. Even the ILO, at the moment when they discuss about the future of work, they were talking about the need of a kind of universal guarantee for everyone. We need to see which are the rights that we need to keep for everyone doing an economic activity, whoever is if it's independent or is subordinate. This is clear, and we need to stand this kind of thing. And this is part of the evaluation that should be needed before going to the social dialogue, because I think we need to be clear which is the situation of right to work or the working time, and or not the working time, the time in general in a country, to really analyze which is the situation and to focus on the different areas. In our case, it's more the labor law issues, but we need also to focus on other regulations.
Thank you, Mariluz. Jorge, a short comment to close the roundtable.
Very, very short. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I would fully agree with what the colleagues said there, and I would propose, apart from social dialogue, something, not apart, but an extension of social dialogue. I would call it social dialogue plus. And for the very simple reason that there are other organizations there representing large groups of our societies in sports clubs, community centers, charities, a number of different organizations which are not for profit. They are not governmental organizations, so I'm talking about NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and other representative groups which have a say on our time and should have a say on our time policy. So from a broader point of view, we should have our social partners sitting down with those organizations as well, so that they can discuss overall how can we go about this to have a better distribution of time, and then when it comes, of course, to working time specifically, then we have social dialogue, the traditional one perhaps, but then if we talk about kind of an enlarged perspective to where we discuss working time within time in general, then we should have this social dialogue plus process in mind, I would argue.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Mariluz. Thank you, Martin. And enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
You can take a seat there. Okay. Let's switch the speakers now. Vamos ahora con el panel local, que lo van a formar Eva Rimbau, que es profesora de Estudios de Economia i Empresa de la... puja endavant. De la UOC, de la Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, y experta también en recursos humanos. Carmen Castro, que es consultora de Igualdad y Políticas Transformadoras. Y Joan Bernat Zubiri, que es profesor de Economía de la Facultad de Relaciones Laborales y Trabajo Social de la Universidad del País Vasco. Buenos días, bienvenidos a los tres a este segundo panel local, esta mesa redonda. Venga, vamos a seguir recabando reacciones, reflexiones sobre el documento, sobre el posicionamiento que nos ha planteado Mariluz Vega. Y vamos a empezar por Eva Rimbau. Eva, en tu experiencia en el área de recursos humanos, sé que nuevas formas de organización del trabajo están cambiando también nuestra organización del tiempo.
Bueno, pues me vais a permitir que utilice una presentación de base porque hay varias ideas que he ido desgranando al respecto. No me voy a alargar mucho y para eso me voy a poner el cronómetro, con vuestro permiso. Perfecto. Porque realmente...
Because I don't know whether... I'll kick off anyway.
Yeah.
There should be translation now. Can you not hear? No. Can you not hear the translation now? Can you hear the translation? Can you hear the translation? Good.
Translation? Okay.
Creo que ahora mismo hay un...
Okay. There is an environment of new forms of working and organizing our working times, and we're talking a lot of things which are not new, but we're talking a lot more about them. And I do think it is worthwhile to take a pause and see how they impact or bring to bear on our time organization, especially in terms of work-life balance. I'm going to center on that. Amongst all these new ways of working, the most important one would be everything that was related to teleworking and hybrid working and working on platforms. I'm not going to add a lot more to that. The 4-day working week, or the compacted working week. It doesn't always have to be 4 days. And then I'll talk about flexible shift. So teleworking, hybrid work, in many conversations, it's the great work-life balance tool, but it's not that just by itself. It's one way of organizing your work, which will serve as a work-life balance tool if it meets these requirements, what we have mentioned. Autonomy in organization of time, so that they can organize their own work, to decide when they work and when not. Because teleworking, we can be actually anchored to the keyboard. And so this autonomy disappears completely. Then the person who teleworks, unless they can clearly separate their personal from their working life, runs a risk. There is a risk, it doesn't always happen, of be continually checking their mail, their mobiles, and working in a lot more hours than if they were in an office when they switch off and go home. Then the organization should facilitate digital disconnection, right? Digital switch off, which this is a cross-cutting issue which covers all the subjects this week. If there are no genuine digital switch-off policies, then teleworking will not help a work-life balance. And then the issue, because we are teleworking, the person should not be overburdened with new tasks, normally linked with care, with family responsibilities, or even, and this is happening, people who telework end up being the Amazon janitor, if you like, of all the all the Amazon dispatches for all their block of flats, so the block of apartments. So if these requirements are met, okay, we worked on platform work, and beyond what we have mentioned in the prior round table, because it is digitalized, there is the danger of always being on, always connected, always linked, and switching off will be a lot more difficult. Then there's another issue, is that if at the beginning of platform work, we were being sold working on platform, I work when I want. When I don't want to, I switch off now. In the practice, and surveys and studies are saying that this would only be valid for the high-level platform work. The low remunerated platform workers have to work many, many hours to reach decent remuneration. So it would not lead to, if you like, decent work. And the algorithms would leave the worker bereft of genuine autonomy. So that would, if you like, not meet one of the proper uses of time. You may think I'm blowing down all the new forms of working, but we must bear in mind the risks. We must not lose sight of them. Another form of working, the 4 days working week or compacted week, which we should see, how do we define it? It's not the same to work the same number of hours, 40 hours in less days, or work less global hours over a week. I continue working 8 hours a day, but 4 days rather than 5. The effects on the global time are obvious, so we have to see how we define that. What is true, and this would be a clear benefit, they do allow more free hours bunched together, or the non-working time. So a compacted week could have this positive knock-on effect, but not everyone prefers to work less days. And again, it's a question of autonomy. Autonomy by the working person to decide when they work. The people will be delighted with these 4 days working week, but there are people who prefer to work 6 days, less hours, for instance, for whatever reason, because it suits their life pattern. And a right to personal time should be based on the autonomy and not closed, inflexible solutions which are applied mutatis mutandis to everyone. And then finally, working flexible shifts. This is nothing new. But there are workers who are not digital. Well, the majority of workers, not just in Spain. Teleworkers in Spain, according to surveys, don't go beyond 30% of the working force. There are many people who have to say, well, what about my right to time? And there we're talking of shifts or flexi time, flexible shifts. But when we talk of we need more options to when we start work and when we finish, that's clear. Many organizations are looking at that. And then creative options, a lot of creativity, which there's a lot of, if you like, there's a lot of leeway for flexible solutions, showing that there should be some shifts which are longer or shorter in a week or a month or seasons. There are some seasons where I work 5 hours and others where I work 10 hours. Well, we have to come to agreements and agree, and then to facilitate the exchange of shifts. And then what I said about the compacted week. There are certain cases where the great benefit for workers, in fact, is to have a compacted week, say 4 days, 10 hours. But the office workers can work, if you like, from home. And there are factories where people work 4 days, and then the extra day is left for cleaning and so on. And they have managed to give, if you like, flexibility. So that must be borne in mind as well. So the new ways of working do have positive knock-on effects on our use of time, but not necessarily will they all be positive unless they are implemented adequately and in a proper fashion. I'm an expert in the question of, from if you like, business studies, and I would make a call to ensure that all actions are taken, not just to reach if you like, executives of large companies who are already involved in social dialogue in one way or another, but to reach the bosses of the small and medium-sized companies, which are the main fabric of our economic structure. Very, very small companies or micro companies, very difficult to change time uses in work unless mentalities of people who have subordinate workers under them. And we're talking there of very small businesses, which are the majority in Europe. And that's a big, big difficulty in changing the reality of work for many people. It's a challenge which are there, and see who takes up the challenge. Thank you, Eva.
Lo apuntaba antes Martín, ¿eh?
It was pointed out by Martin. She said this is a win-win situation. This is not a war between employers and employee. It's a bargaining process, and it means that agreements have to be reached. Carmen Castro, according to your experience, how could new time organizations impact on women, and how can we mitigate existing inequalities? Thank you very much for your question. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation and for the opportunity to contribute to these documents and to this discussion. I will briefly justify my presence here. I'm a PhD doctor in economics, and I belong to the feminist chair of the University of Valencia. I'm an associate professor at the University of Valencia, and I've been an activist for 30 years. We are promoting a pioneering reform that has meant that in Spain, birth leaves and adoption leaves have been made proportional, and this is a part of public policy making that contributes to rights and to equality. And I'm an equality consultant. I've been doing that for over 25 years through my self-employment. I have innovated, and I am an entrepreneur, and then I also work for Licadi. I'm not here to do self-promotion, but we are here to contribute to this discussion, and I just wanted to share my background with all of you. I think that I will repeat some of the elements that have been brought up in the first panel of the morning. One of the most relevant elements of this discussion and in this Time Use Week that you have organized is that we can focus on what matters the most. Time or working times redistribution is positive. Well, which are the working times that we are talking about? It's been made apparent that we can debunk myths, the myth of the distribution of working times, which has never been the case for the majority of the population in other parts of the world, as it's been said before. But it's never been the case for most women who have never had their day split in 8 plus 8 plus 8, 8 working hours, 8 resting hours, and 8 leisure hours. And that's the strategic value of this discussion and event, because we can highlight and focus on the necessary changes to decentralized paid working times in our lives. And if we are talking to the right to time, well, I think that we should discuss time in a more broad manner. So it's not only to go from this triangle, this 8 plus 8 plus 8, which was never the case for many people, to a rhomboid, another shape that includes unpaid work that is basically done at home, but not only, and that is mainly done by women. So it's not only about that change, but we should also rethink which are other public policies that need to be reformed to supplement the change of the economic paradigm and to materialize the right to time as the right to sustainability in life and the rights of caregivers. So what about women and the benefits for women? I think that people in general, if we reduce paid working hours and the relevance of work in our 24-hour day, that's a positive element in itself for everyone. But is it more positive or less positive for women? Well, I honestly don't see transformation potential in that change. Most women take on much more time, working time, than what is included in paid working time. In Spain, if we check the old 2010 survey data, we would be talking about +5 working hours, unpaid working hours for women apart from their jobs. And then we can explain that we have a very high time poverty index. 30% of women are affected by time poverty. So if we reduce paid working hours, will this improve the distribution of chores and will improve the equality for women? Well, maybe yes, maybe not, because it's not that women have to work less hours in their paid jobs, but we should generate resources and public policies to materialize the right to care. And the other part of the population should take on their responsibility in informal care work and the sustainability of life. So yes, it's positive. Proposals to reduce paid working hours are positive and benefit women, but we need to include all interests and all needs by everyone. Of course, it would be fantastic for society at large for men to stop being absent in the responsibility of care work. But that was not the question, was it? No, but someone had to say it. Maybe because it also affects time users, especially time used by women. Okay, let's move on. Let's listen to John Bernat. John, let me ask you about the 4-day working week. How could that contribute to what has been presented so far? Good morning. Firstly, I'm very happy to be here with all of you and sharing the panel with Carmen and Eva and the other colleagues who have taken the floor this morning and yesterday. And I think that we are all very aligned regarding this subject matter. The 4-day working hour or the 32-hour working week or the 32-hour working week, which is being proposed by many social partners because, as Eva said, the business world is very diverse. There are big companies, smaller companies. Well, that can contribute to an improvement of our life as a society. I work with Verónica Castrillón, a professor of economics in the Basque Country, and the added value, as economists say, is that we can calculate, we can crunch the numbers of this kind of measure and the tax return. So the cost for the business, the improvements on the wages side, and it also has tax benefits. I'll give you some examples at the end. The 37.5-hour working week is what is being proposed, and then we want to go down to 32 working hours a week for everyone, not only for women who decide to work partially and not men. So when Veronica and myself started to make this proposal some years back, we were preaching in the desert, but then some governments took it on in Guipúzcoa, in Navarre. I'm from Bilbao, so these were very close administrations. And then we started discussing the 34-hour working week. Compromís in Valencia started to propose that. Yesterday, the Popular Party announced that they cancelled the 4-day working week in Valencia. So hopefully international organizations will help us put pressure on the Valencian government. The main union in Spain also proposed a 32-hour working week, and I met Marta Junque in Valencia, and that was fantastic because we had been discussing time uses. Yolanda Díaz, the vice president of Spain, was discussing this matter, but it was not coming true. And people would ask us, and we said, well, we don't really know. And Marta Junque all of a sudden told us that they were trying to implement that. And it was fantastic news to discuss the reduction of the maximum legal working day, because the working day reduction can improve lives if it's for everyone. So it should not be a voluntary measure. It should be a generalized measure. So why does this contribute? And can I overrun by 3 minutes? Okay, you let me know when I have 3 minutes left. I will not elaborate on the diagnosis because we are friends here and we are all aligned. We want to implement this kind of public policies at all levels, locally and internationally, as Marie-Luz mentioned in the first panel. But we've had a neoliberal period of, going for capital and against labor. So we need to improve the wealth distribution for the working class. And when you discuss this with employers, well, they scream, and we say, well, maybe if you don't want to do a pay rise, you can reduce working hours. It might seem a radical measure, but it's a sweet spot, because we need to improve total actual wages, and that is the right measure for women. And, well, for most women working in low-income, precarious industries. So they don't want, employers don't want to discuss pay rises, but we're talking about cleaning workers, etc. And then the second element is very apparent. Paid labor is very divided. We have many men doing OT every week in Spain. This is incredible. Unpaid OT is supposedly distributed in an egalitarian manner between men and women. And then we have partial work that is basically done by women. When men and women are asked about partial work is divided between voluntary and mandatory. What's not voluntary is mandatory. Okay, yeah. Or forced partial work, which is midway between work and unemployment. But those people who decide to work partially, 27% of women work partially in Spain and only 5 to 6% of men. When you ask those women why they have a partial job, a part-time job, well, they respond because they need to take care of their family. And 95% of the surveyed people, 95% are women. So this duality in the labor world is an imbalance in life in general, and there is a sexist distribution of labor. And that's the third element of persisting inequality. We discussed this with Carmen in Valencia. This can help or not, but the working hours reduction for everyone, especially for men too, basically opens up the possibility, raising feminist awareness, if we also basically force men to take on care work. Because if you get home at 10 p.m., well, everyone is asleep, so you don't do any care work. And then underestimated chronic unemployment, that is quite a problem in Spain. So what do we defend? A general reduction of the working hours, precisely because we can have pilot experiences in some businesses, we can have collective bargaining. Some regions, for example, Catalonia, had some local agreements at some point. But we need to basically reduce the working hours for everyone, men and women, and for all activities, not only for high-tech businesses or big power companies. No, for the trade industry, for SMEs, for the hospitality industry, which is very important in Spain. And finally, the reduction has to be on an equal footing, and it has to redistribute wages. We need support for hiring policies. If we want to change the labor model, well, this should be done by all employers, and then the costs of this implementation in terms of reduction of working hours, this could have some tax benefits, and we could also fine those companies that don't want to change, and we could reward the companies that are willing to change. So what is being proposed currently in Spain, 37.5 hours a week, has a very little cost. Veronica and myself have calculated that this would cost about 4.3 billion. And then they would pay less tax. So we are talking about 3 billion euros. This is nothing. And then there are tax benefits in terms of social security savings and the tax balance. We are talking about a return of about 2/3 of the total net labor cost for the administration. So 37.5 hours a week. In some industries, this would wouldn't really entail any change. We would need to discuss with the employers how to implement the 37.7-hour working week, especially hospitality, industry, transportation, and building work. These are the main activities where we would need sectoral collective bargaining for the implementation of this 37.5-hour working week. And as Marie-Lou said, governments have said that we need to have a 32-hour working week horizon. So 32 working hours a week in Spain, we have the cost for that, because we want to disseminate this message. So we would be talking about 29 billion euros. The bailout of the banking sector were 65 billion. So we're only talking about 29 billion to go down to a 32-hour working week. Of course, we will be creating new jobs. In France, their legislation created between 1/3 and 1/5 of new jobs. So in Spain, with a measure to promote job creation, we would be talking about 30 to 50% of new jobs. So 29 billion is the cost of the implementation of the 32-hour working week. So that has a return for the public administration in terms of savings, social security, unemployment savings, income tax, personal income tax, VAT. So this is cheap. And the 37.5-hour working week is nearly for free. And then the 32-hour working week has a big return. So maybe employers, maybe companies could be rewarded. We could have in place a stimulus plan. And employers really love to get money for free. They usually like it.
Muchas gracias, Joan Bernat.
Thank you so much, Joan Bernat, for your address. Okay, it's your turn now, Q&A session. I don't know whether those of you who are here or those who are following us on streaming. Okay, over there we have a question. Okay, it's a question which is fairly easy but complex at the same time. I am slightly bothered by the individual reaction to a reduction of the working week to 32 hours, which is the trend to pluri-jobs, to pluri-employment. Salaries are not that wonderful in Spain. There are many people who need to top up their salaries with badly paid extra jobs, which are going to generate a lot more working hours. And even now today, there's no sort of working week reduction. And we do need to control overtime. It's all very well to cut back the working week, but if we don't control overtime, and there was a reform in 2012 which did limit working hours, so we have to have a cultural change, if you like. I don't know what your views are on the risks, the inherent risks of these changes. I am bothered by having more free time. And given the economic difficulties, I'll actually go and find an extra job or actually work more overtime. How do you see that from a feminist viewpoint or an organizational one? Joan Bernat, you were the last speaker. You're the first one to react, therefore. Well, perhaps a number of questions, then we can answer en bloc. Leah, you are the one. Shall we listen to all questions and then answer them en bloc? What do you think? Okay. Joan Bernat, this one. There's an economist, who's an actual benchmark, Albert Recio, who's always said, answering what Maria said, that the working time reduction and the maximum legal time generate a loss of employment. There are many sectors and activities who go beyond that framework. But if there is a rule, and we saw that in France with 35 hours, and Nicolas Sarkozy deactivated precisely by checking overtime. But as the as overtime is worth more than the normal was, you deactivate the transformative potential of a reduction. But that is where a regulation is needed, doing away with non-paid overtime, with a tough, robust labor inspection force, and so limiting the legal and illegal possibilities opened up. Let's be brief in your answers because there are quite a few questions raised. Well, I fully agree with Marie-Lou in the question of checking maximum overtime, and the question of pluriemployment is already happening. A proposal to cut back the maximum working week is 32 with intermediate solutions doesn't allow us to complement public policies. The basic idea for reduction of working week is not to change the whole system, but it can be the driver which accelerates other changes. Part of these has a gradual increase in the minimum salary, the minimum wage, which would help the most precarious sectors where women take pride of place, and they're the ones where you have pluriemployment. So the serious articulation of a state publicly funded system, a national system or regional or whatever, it should be public. A public integrated system of care guidance, not just care for people, but sustainability in terms of life, right? And looking above all healthy alternatives, and a policy of the rights of non-labor regulated activity. So this extra, when we have this extra time, there should be other possibilities for our systems of social protection, which are not just based on social contributions. We need public policies to make sure this is not possible. Ever, the whole question of working week, maintaining our salary, from the organizational viewpoint, that would involve having people working less hours to pay them the same. Well, they're producing less and I'm paying the same. So we need actions which to increase productivity of persons, do the same in these less hours, which would justify wage maintenance. So I think the big challenge, people saying, okay, I'll give you money for free. No, that's not it. But to commit to companies, we need a different philosophy. We say, help companies to increase productivity, incentivating new innovation in terms of processes, technology, what have you, to be able to ensure that these people working less hours, productivity increases, and wages could be maintained, when not improved and hiked, and that would be beneficial for the whole country. It'd do away with the need to have different jobs and would allow companies to improve their productivity. More questions, please, from the floor. Okay. Thanks ever so much for your question and for the previous panel. And from the viewpoint, when I look at reality as a sociologist, if we look at some of the things that have been said today, I do have doubts, in particular with the question of autonomy. Because when we are putting on the table the fact that working people should have autonomy to decide, the first thing that comes to mind is, hey, wait a minute, the decisions are not neutral in terms of gender or class. So we give autonomy to working persons, and they could choose the options which reinforce inequality. And what we should do is to look at universal, cross-cutting measures which affect everyone, give us the same opportunity to all, and avoiding this autonomy, and not a capacity decision. It's a very weak borderline, if you like. I'm not saying that they should be totally rigid, but before talking of autonomy, without having control, without having if you like, enough information to ensure that inequality is not reinforced and that is seen in questions of gender. There's a lot of, if you look at the decision and the circumstances and power relationship within the home come to mind, for instance. I do think what is important to think of political tools, so quotas, for instance, or think of or if there's a workplace where you can carry out teleworking, there should be a quota. At least not just women, but also a minimum number of men should also get involved in teleworking. So conditions which could lead to a modification of gender relationships. To sum up, I can see many, many risks when we come to talk of autonomy tout court, and there's a lot more potential, I think, in universal cross-cutting measures which will allow to a proper redistribution of roles beyond the labour market. And I'd like to know what you see that. Is that a question for any of you? Well, I think the person who's talked a lot about the question of autonomy is Eva, but I'm happy to listen to the others' viewpoint. Eva. Well, my position is a personal one, I'm speaking personally here, and I am bothered by universal measures, even though I understand the position from where you're coming from. But I do think we should be cautious. I fully agree. And that equality units have an important role to play in these matters, analyzing if teleworking is having a bearing on men rather than women, if it is promoting those who are working in the office in detriment of those who are teleworking, especially women. I take the view that these generalized obligations are complicated, because at the end of the day, I'm not that convinced that they're going to change a specific dynamic of what happens in each person's home. But from my viewpoint, I'm speaking personally, so I'm not. This point of view should be seen from a much wider perspective, a more holistic perspective. Inequalities at a social level, from a wide-ranging viewpoint. But if we start imposing quotas, and we start putting layers of quotas in all dimensions of uses and different ways of working of organizations, this can be very, very difficult to manage, even though I know where you're coming from, and if you like, the whole ethos of your proposal. So, anyway, let's see what others say. Okay. I am in favor of a mix, right, which are not necessarily exclusive. I think that you're talking of basis whereby, equality rules, and we must be vigilant. I don't know whether it's been manageable or not, right? We shall see how it can be done. But to accompany people, to avoid people being smart Alex, and which in fact which would if we could try to place two policies and ways of working which go against the whole ethos. I don't know how we could do it with a rotation system in the places which well, it's not possible everywhere. Not all the occupational sectors can look at teleworking or rotation. But I was thinking of other formula. And I don't rule out quotas. It could be studied in certain contexts, but I do think we have other formula, like just, for instance, incorporating a professional figure with a specific purpose within employing organizations, equality delegates in companies who could support and help companies to adapt the reality to the reality of the organization, and rather than sort of inflexible measures which could lead to the opposite what is desired. But I can understand what you basically equality to have a certain margin of autonomy, but looking at the conditions. But I just remembered one important data. In the pandemic, we were all locked at home, and 100% teleworking for men and for women. What happened? Men have been a lot more productive, and the women are carrying out all the care tasks. And there are studies that bear that out. So even though we send everyone home, but if what happens in the home doesn't change and roles don't change, the results won't be the ones we want. I do think we need a cultural change. We're saying to look at remunerated working time, taking a long, hard glance at it, is not isolated from other changes. No man is an island, as the poet said. So we do need a big change of social organization, an important cultural change. And that can be a driver, hopefully, which allows us to rethink how we put mercantilized working time within the environment of our lives. But not last comment, and we'll close this panel. I would fully agree with what has been said. Voluntary measures to cut back working time. Let's look at the Nordic countries with the universal right to working time reduction, with the legal right to go back to a complete working time for whatever reason. 80% of women in the Netherlands work part-time, and it's 45% of men. So voluntary measures when it comes to working times are always going to reduce working time for women, as we see with the voluntary rights which do exist. The reduction because you have young children at home. So generalized reduction can homogenize, which Marie-Ruth has explained. The key work is to homogenize, to generate social equality, because the voluntary reduction means that there'll be more sexist duality in terms of mercantilized working share. And with Veronica, we were in Pamplona, and Veronica had a wonderful idea. Let's see. The 29 million costs for the reducing the working time. Instead of each company having to pay it, what we could do is that all the companies pay the reduction of working time across the board for everyone with a small tax, and then return costs generated by the company. They should be to apply that. I don't want to apply. Don't, but you pay. You pay your contribution to the cross-reform, like taxes. And nobody discusses, or almost no one discusses or argues against taxes. Do we want greater equality? All companies should put money into a kitty. If they don't wish to reduce their working hours, fine. No problem, but you have to pay into a tax, which will fund and finance, and some companies more ambitious and wish to change and reduce their working hours. And the same with social changes. We need some system via tax to fund that. Thank you, Bernard. Thanks, Eva. Thanks, Carmen, for your contributions. And we have talked about managing time to generate equality in both panels, looking at sustainability, efficiency, and the importance of collective bargaining. We have looked at compacting, weekly rest time, improving shifts, and cutting back working times, and also the need to ensure that governments implement EU directives and regulations, and have plans to regulate working times. The solution comes from different players. We have looked at the benefits of rationalization of time, also in productivity, and in the last part of the panel, we have underscored risks involved in these changes, the need to adopt a wider perspective given inequalities, especially those which have to do with gender, And here we should establish a cultural change to ensure that it is effective. Now we have a coffee break, and you have to come back here at 11:45, right here. And in the second panel, we look at the role of collective bargaining, the importance of collective bargaining in the organization of time policies. And you can also check out these posters, which contain information on different Catalan networks which promote optimization of time policies. Thank you all, and enjoy your coffee break. Thank you.